Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to anyone who is joining us today. As people are logging in, I'm just going to give it a minute or so before we actually start the session. So as that's happening, I'd really love to check out the chat feature, make sure it's working right. So I'd love for you to share in the chat where you're actually joining us from today. I will start. I am actually calling in from the United States. I'm calling in from New Jersey. Craig and Laura, do you want to share where you're calling in from today?
Yes, I'm calling from Woking, but actually I'm from Leeds. Normally it's just that I'm down here for a couple of days doing a little south visit.
And I am in the hometown, so I'm in Leeds at the moment, in the north of England, where it is snowing.
Oh, that's
snowing
nice.
all day.
Is it late in the season for you to get snow, or is that typical?
No, it is late. Yeah. This is where we're expecting the nice weather to start.
I hear you.
So we've got quite a few people. Charlotte in North Carolina. Amy's from Charlotte, North Carolina. Danielle, it's snowing in Birmingham as well in the UK.
Nice.
Vancouver.
Katia
Good
from
morning.
Vancouver. Lovely.
That is, I believe, pretty early for them.
Thank you for joining.
Yes, Detroit. Lovely.
Buckingham.
Oh,
David's there representing Chesterfield, also snowing.
Oh.
I think it'll be a theme from people calling from the UK that it will be snowing.
That's so,
yeah. We do get very excited about snow because it doesn't happen very often. And when it does, everyone's like, is it snowing there? Yes.
And when you get a little snow, it's a big deal, right? It's like,
yeah.
Does the country stop?
The country
it does.
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
I'm on the northeast of the United States. We are used to getting snow, and actually it's been very quiet this year. We haven't had a lot of snow. So anyway, so as people are logging on, again, if you're just joining us, we'd love to hear where you're calling in from. So use the chat feature and let us know. It's always nice to, in these webinars, it always makes us feel like we're all close, but yet we're so far in a global sense. And that is one thing I do love about these live webinars, is really having that connection. But anyway, as people are logging on, I want to be conscious of time. So I just want to welcome everybody to today's webinar discussion on delivery management for event-based learning. With our presenters today, Laura Barrett and Craig Stokes. For those of you who are new and haven't joined us on a webinar before, my name is Kim Heyer. I'm with GP Strategies, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. So before we get started, I just know everybody's one question, and I'm going to answer it right now. We will be sending out a copy of the slides and a recording of today's session. You will get the email directly from me in your inbox tomorrow. Most likely tomorrow morning. So please feel free to share it, or if you miss any of the content today, you'll have it to review. So again, even though everyone's lines are muted, we want to make this time together as interactive as possible. So I'm encouraging you to contribute during today's webinar. If you have any comments during the presentation, use the chat feature like you are now. To engage with the presenters and also your other fellow attendees. But if you do have any specific questions for the presenters, I do ask that you use the Q&A option and that way I can monitor them, and then we'll be able to respond to them after the presentation time allotted. So again, I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I'm really excited to introduce you to my colleagues or presenters today. So first, we have Laura Barrett, and Laura has over 20 years of experience in learning, working with multiple high-profile, award-winning global organizations to deliver impactful, creative solutions that are effective and scalable. With a true passion for human-centered design, Laura has worked with clients running workshops on design thinking to transfer learning teams into trusted advisors rather than order takers. Welcome, Laura. And we also have Craig Stokes. Craig works with global and regional clients to consult on learning requirements. architect learning solutions, and promotes modern learning techniques in order to provide engaging learner experiences. He specializes in analyzing existing programs to identify areas where improvements can be made in order to improve the learner experience. We really have a great session planned for today. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Craig and Laura. The floor is yours. Have a great session.
Thank you, Kim, and welcome everybody. It's lovely to be here to talk to you about this topic today that we're very passionate about, and nice to see so many of you as well. Some of you that we know, some of you that are new as well. So let's get started. So question on screen there: why is it important to adapt our delivery management mindsets as learning evolves? So post-pandemic, we and our clients are much more conscious of when we should bring people together. So gone are those days where people would be okay to, go on a jolly, have 3 days in the classroom, listening to someone go through a series of slides, and then maybe get a workbook at the end of it that stays in the bottom of their desk drawer, gathering dust. And I must admit, I do have a few of those in my drawer just down here. So what we've learned post-pandemic and during the pandemic as well, that time together of bringing people together is really valuable, particularly when it's for learning and development. And because of that, the experience matters. So we've kind of learned through from digital maturity that we don't need to be talked at. For a theory, a simple video can be used and that does the job. Synchronous learning, so that in-person learning, whether it's virtual or whether it's face-to-face, should be about rehearsing skills. It should be about having experiences that allow us to reflect on ourselves and our behaviors, skills, capabilities, etc. So those rare moments where we get away from the desk, away from the day-to-day grind of work, those moments are the ones that should matter. They should stand out and they should mean something. So that's why we've started to think about face-to-face learning as event-based learning. So what do I mean by that? So typically, think about a learning of intervention that's got a sense of occasion. So maybe it's built up with elements that build excitement. So invitations, packs, videos, things like that. And then the actual sessions themselves are delivered in a really impactful and memorable manner. And they can be one-off events. They can be journeys that unfold over a series of months, and they could even be a wide-scale global rollout. It can encompass many different delivery styles, from in-person, virtual reality, coaching cohorts, and many, many more. So what we're going to do today is share an example of our experiences of where we've done this to illustrate kind of what we learned along the way and what our key takeaways are, and hopefully to set you up for success when you do something similar. As Kim mentioned earlier, as we're going through this, please do put your questions in the Q&A, and use the chat as well. So if you've got similar examples or experiences that you want to share with the group, please do. We'd love to hear kind of what you're doing as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to go to Laura and ask you, what are some of the key challenges of delivering what we're calling event-based learning?
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, so there's 3 key challenges that are vital to overcoming in order for the delivery of learning to work effectively. The first is understanding what the overall journey looks like. You need to have a big picture of what happens at every single stage, whether it's a 3-hour VILT, a 1-day workshop, or a 6-month journey with multiple different touch points. You need to consider things that, what is happening, who needs to be involved, what planning's required. Next, I think we need to understand what the right modalities are, particularly virtual or face-to-face. What are those key moments that matter, that call for people to be face-to-face? And if virtual, how do we elevate it and make the most of that experience for people? And lastly, but so very, very important, we need to ensure that learning has the intended impact. This is the key, the X factor, and particularly tough for one-off learning events sometimes, but it's ensuring that the learning sparks the intended change in behaviour. The learner must always be at the heart of everything that we do. And the outcome of the learning for that person needs to be at the forefront of our minds when we're creating that. You know, if we forget that, it's the event may not have it, you know, it may have the impact in that particular moment, but it likely won't have the long lasting impact that you intended it to have.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, so what we're going to do now is share how we did this in practice. And really, it did have that long-lasting impact. So we're really pleased to kind of talk you through that. So over to you, Laura. You're going to kind of talk us through the overview.
Yeah, so I'll talk you through what we did. Our client was a multinational technology services and consulting company. And back in April 2022, the programme called Future Leaders was launched, and marking the programme's 9-year, designed to promote growth in leadership, presence and commercial awareness. The programme offers coaching, mentoring and networking opportunities with peers and senior leaders. All candidates for the programme are nominated to take part by their business leads, and those selected go on then an 8-month journey to help them realise and achieve their own potential. 2022's journey was one of the most immersive experience that we've developed to date, a blend of in-person and virtual events, and it featured actors, experiential activities, virtual reality, forum theatre, presentations to a panel of senior leaders, including the UK MD. And then it all culminated in a gala dinner at the iconic Gherkin building in central London. It was amazing. And the programme was an overwhelming success. To date, we've got 15 people out of the 40 participants that have been promoted since the programme ended 4 months ago, which is unbelievable. It's amazing
Incredible.
that so many people have been promoted. But let's look at some of the different elements of the journey in a little bit more detail, I think. So if we look at where we started, we felt it was really important to have the launch event as in person. We wanted the cohort to get to know each other better and have an opportunity to meet senior leaders, the alumni. But when we were architecting the journey, we started by considering what those key elements that we wanted to draw out. So we wanted the cohort to get to know each other. We wanted them to understand the strengths and weaknesses as leaders, and therefore understanding where their development needs were in line with the company's leadership vision. The cohort being welcomed to the programme by the senior leaders, as well as hearing from alumni of the programme. Many of those as well have gone on to become senior leaders themselves. And hearing their personal stories and careers were all things that we wanted to draw out of this particular day. And as we then looked at building these activities and experiences for the day around those different elements, we considered lots of different things about that experience. We had arts and crafts, a wall of fear, round tables, speed dating. We also brought in an amazing facilitator called Graham Hyde, that we really trusted him, and we knew that he could bring everything together and bring the event for us to life, as he did throughout the programme. But it's not just about the day itself. You know, we wanted to create excitement for, yes, that particular launch event, but also the programme. So before everybody got together, everyone received a chocolate bar, and inside that, a little bit like Willy Wonka, they got a golden ticket that told them, had a QR code, and it told them more about the actual event and the programme. We had to make sure that we had the right venues throughout. So, you know, the launch event, we had a lot of considerations, and actually as a big learn for 2023 as we move in, we didn't actually visit the launch event site, but we saw it through pictures. But it was a big learn that we know this year we need to actually visit those. but we also needed to make sure that we had the right people there. So who was going to add value to participants' journey as we went through? So we selected specific senior leaders to support alumni that had an amazing story to tell. You know, the participants, the learning team, all of those people we had to plan in. And we also had to plan for the greeting of participants and ensure that we had activities planned for the evening meal the night before, which during the architecture we originally didn't have, and we quickly had to think of something on what we were going to do. We did a little bit of fact bingo, but something we needed to we learn from as we are architecting, and we could certainly consider it then into 2023's program.
Yeah, and some of those points are really, really important. So, you know, scoping out the event venue. I mean, we'd planned this really good activity called the Wall of Fear, and we were going to put these acetates on all of the walls, and people were literally going to write on the walls all of their fears. And we got to the room, and there were antique mirrors covering all of the
Everywhere.
walls. So we had to really quickly work out how we were going to do that instead. So yeah, definitely a learning
Yeah.
for this year's program. So
Yeah.
moving on to the virtual element. So at the heart of the journey, as it progressed over the months, there were a series of virtual events. Now, as I'm sure a lot of you listening today, throughout the pandemic, we really learned how we had to make the most of these virtual sessions or VALTs to make them really interactive and engaging. But for this journey, we had to think about how we could make each one stand out and provide a truly unique experience. And it really challenged us creatively to think about what we could do differently. So think beyond the platform, think beyond the laptop even. How could we transcend VALT and make it just as impactful as an in-person face-to-face event? So a couple of examples we've got on the screen here. So we had the session around emotional intelligence. And what we did was we brought in an internationally renowned expert on the topic called Dr. Chris Bray, a really good speaker, to really bring the topic to life. And then what we did was we split the cohort into smaller groups, and they were able to analyze, really sort of have a personal session where they were analyzing their own emotional intelligence through Hogan assessments. And then we brought in a senior leader from the business to talk about what emotional intelligence means in that company. So actually they got that external view, they got the internal, like me view, but then they also got the company view as well of really bringing that context in and why it's so important that as leaders, as future leaders, you have really good self-awareness and self-regulation, and you can motivate others and you have empathy and all of those things like that. So it kind of took the somewhat abstract to the reality of working in that company. We then had a session on leading through uncertainty and managing change. And again, we really wanted to have a point of difference on it. What we wanted to do was give the learners an experience where they actually went through uncertainty themselves and had to manage change. So what we did was we set up a role play. We put everyone into breakout rooms and told them, gave them a kind of case study and said, okay, we want you to go away and plan how you would approach this project. Halfway through that breakout room, we dropped in actors who were playing the role of the CEO in the scenario, and they changed everything. So they said, okay, we're halving the budget. We want it delivered in 3 months instead of 6 months. Oh, and we have to offshore as well. And it really caused people, you know, they actually experienced that uncertainty, experienced that moment of change. And they had to think about it. They had to react and they had to pivot accordingly. Really took them out of their comfort zone. Some really loved it, but some hated it.
Yeah.
But it really made them sit up and think about how they personally dealt with that change in uncertainty. And then, you know, in real life, how they react as leaders when those kind of things happen, because they happen all the time when we're living in this VUCA world. We continue to use actors in a slightly different way, though. So we brought in our partners from Steps Drama. And what they did was they hosted a virtual session around unconscious bias, where they played out a scenario which the participants then had the opportunity to question the actors actually in character. So it's called a hot seating activity. Again, it got quite, you know, uncomfortable because they thought they were just going to give some actors some feedback on how they did or didn't demonstrate their unconscious biases. But actually what happened was the actors in character kind of argued back and really got them to think about, you're giving me this feedback, but how would you do this in your real life? And again, it took people slightly into that zone of being a little bit uncomfortable, but actually really got them to sit up and think about, okay, so I'm giving this feedback, but am I doing this myself? Am I giving more attention to the people who sit on the same desk as me rather than those who are virtual? So again, it had a really big impact on those people. And then as a final example, we had a session that explored 3 key leadership skills that we really wanted to bring out. The 3 C's, we called them: creativity, critical thinking, and collaboration. So to bring this to life, we got the participants to come to one of 2 venues, and we had them take part in a virtual reality escape room, where essentially the premise was you were the first commercial time travelers, and you're going to see 20 years in the future to understand what the future of the workplace would look like, and what do you need to do as a leader to adapt. And then suddenly they were all thrown into different time zones that were separated from each other, and they had to work together in that VR escape room to think creatively, think collaboratively, and use their critical thinking to solve problems together in order to escape the escape room and get back into the time stream. So it was a really kind of unusual and abstract activity, but we had a really deep debrief afterwards where they had the opportunity to think about, okay, so I used those skills in that situation. So again, how do I use those skills in a similar way in my real life? And then even more so than the in-person launch event, all of these virtual sessions needed to be planned meticulously to ensure that everyone was where they were meant to be at the right time: actors, speakers, all of these people, so that the element of surprise was maintained and the key learning points were covered at the right time. And actually, we even went one step further. So to accompany each virtual session, we encouraged the participants to meet up afterwards in their peer groups. So we put them into peer groups and meet on a monthly basis to make sense of what they'd experienced and discuss how they could apply it in their personal leadership development. So we really got them to think about what they were learning and how they could apply it. So just some examples there of how we kind of thought differently and thought creatively to really bring those virtual sessions to life. But the key thing was creativity, thinking differently, and really meticulous planning to make sure it all comes together. Talking of meticulous planning and things coming together, I'm going to pass back to Laura now, who's going to talk about how the journey came to an impactful conclusion. Over to you, Laura.
Wow, what a conclusion it was. So we wanted to bring the journey to a close with a bang. It had to be impressive. We'd gone to so much detail right through, and there was a little bit of one-upmanship, I guess, because last year was the first time that Craig and I had architected this program for our client. In previous years, we knew that there'd been pop-up restaurant experiences, theatre experiences. So we really wanted this one to stand out. So it actually had it was one of the first things that we considered. We kind of worked backwards. So we started with the end event. So we decided to bring the cohort back together in person for 2 days. And Day 1 revolved around a team challenge in which delegates brought all the skills and insight together to tackle a given business challenge around a series of topics such as recruitment diversity, deals, employee reward and recognition, emotional intelligence in leadership, and sustainability. And these were real challenges that had been set by the UKMD. And so what they did is, using the tenets of design thinking to produce a truly human-centered solution, delegates were tasked with delivering a proposal to a panel of senior leaders, which included the programme sponsors, senior leaders, and the UKMD. Took a whole day out to come and join us and listen to the solutions. And then, following the stress of the presentations, on day 2, the groups embarked on a treasure hunt around London that took them to different famous landmarks, possibly a few pubs, I think.
1 or 2.
Yeah, and culminated in a secret location for the celebration event, in which our future leaders were invited to the top 2 floors of the Gherkin, where they celebrated their achievements with a gala dinner amongst amazing panoramic views of London, making it a really, really unforgettable evening and programme. And, you know, as I say, we actually started planning the treasure hunt in February, I think it was, 22. So, gosh, just over a year ago. And actually walked the route, and we visited the Gherkin, and we were meticulous in that detail and planning that we had to do. But we had to ensure the right venue, and every aspect of that treasure hunt and final event had to be planned, timed to the millisecond, to ensure that everyone ended up where they needed to be, and that, you know, it would be a very big success. And again, it was ensuring that everyone involved were in the right places at the right times. We had 7 WhatsApp groups going, running on the final day. Craig were amazing at running those. And even the table settings in the Gherkin were correct, and liaising with florists and getting certificates and glass awards. It was true event planning. But it was all worth it, and everyone had the most amazing finale to the program. It was truly incredible.
It was, and it was really cool is that we kept it a secret from everybody. So we knew, and you know, a few of our colleagues knew in the learning team, but nobody else knew. Not even the senior leaders knew where that final event was going to take place. And I remember a moment, I think, where we were sitting in the hotel bar, probably in our nice dresses and suits and stuff, thinking, God, we were sat in the same bar like nearly a year ago, planning this route. I remember we walked around and we said, is it too far to walk all the way here? And, you know, can we get them to get to Borough Market around lunchtime and that kind of thing? And just to see it actually come to life, and then to actually go to the top of the Gherkin. And even though we'd, you know, 2 hours before had been setting up all the tables, it wasn't till we got there and it was all lit up and you actually saw it. It was just absolutely awe-inspiring. And we knew it was happening. So imagine how it felt for those people who had no idea that that's what was going to happen. And it was incredible.
Again, it was, so I think part of what we considered all the way through was the emotion that would help people on that journey as well, because there's a part of that that will help in their storytelling, because, you know, the emotion will help them remember and cement on the learning that they've gone through. It really was great.
Okay, so I think what we wanted to do was just share this quote, because it's a really nice quote that we got from one of the participants. You come expecting to be taught how to be a leader, and you leave having learnt how to be the best you. And that just sums everything up, because people come into this, they think it's going to be another leadership training thing, but actually they went through that experience. And I think every single person of the 40 people in that cohort that went through it was changed by the end. And you could see, from seeing them in person on that first launch event to seeing them in the evening of the last day in the Gherkin in their suits and dresses and everything, it was incredible. The journey that they had come on and the development that they had as people, it was absolutely incredible. And it was a pleasure to be part of as well, honestly. So Laura, what did you learn about the specific delivery needs for a program like this with such a variety of delivery methods and requirements?
So I think the program continually evolves, and that's really, really important. It for me, it can't be the same every year, and our client doesn't want that. They want to change it so that it's new for everybody that goes on that journey. And you know, for us, we need to constantly think about ways in which we bring that content to life and add that impact and create that change we want to do. The next thing would be planning. Wow, I mean, every event that we did was like planning a wedding. Like you imagine planning multiple weddings over a 7-month journey, it's tough. Things don't just happen, you know, venues, speakers, the different people that need to be involved, facilitators, actors, VR headsets,
VR headsets.
budgets have to be maintained within that. But the experience has an amazing impact on the participants. And we've seen that in the feedback. We've just seen one of them, but we had so much feedback. And if we can help anybody in their careers, so we've seen I went through the promotion rates, you know, 15 out of 40 delegates that have now been promoted is incredible. And it really helps our client on their strategic journey as well, and to maintain the people that are important to their business. There's also importance of making connections. So this was a huge part of the program that we did, you know, those between the cohorts, the impact of networking with senior leaders and building those relationships, you know, so that they can reach out to those people to help them. For me as well, because something new to our client was that I led the program throughout. As Craig mentioned, we were both involved all the way through. We attended every single event, but I was that key person in between the cohort, senior leaders, and helping them in their development. And I think it's really important to ensure that these connections are realised when we're looking at creating these programs and delivering them for clients, because there should be the forefront should be of our minds should be about that learner and the experience that they're going to go on. So there are a few from me. I mean, there'd be loads, I think. But what about you, Craig? What are your biggest takeaways?
So thinking about it from like a design point of view, I think one thing that was key was understanding what the right modality was for each part of the program. So which elements needed to be face-to-face, which would be effective as virtual, what would be more suited to informal peer coaching sessions, speaker sessions, Q&As, that kind of thing. And again, as we spoke about earlier, how do we elevate each session to make it special and memorable like an event? And I think, you know, we got feedback from last year, and I think this year's journey, we can't give anything away, but we're going to try and do a little bit more face-to-face because, you know, we heard that people wanted to have a little bit more face-to-face, but still have those informal and virtual sessions as well. I think in this case, the difference between producing one-off sessions and what we'd normally do. So normally what we do is we roll out workshops, in-person events to large-scale deliveries to tens of thousands of people across the globe. But what was special and interesting about this was that every single session was tailored to those 40 people. It was based on the cohort, it was based on what we knew about them, and each session and experience built on the last one to create that really, really unique journey. It also meant you know, we had to kind of design and deploy in a slightly different way. So we didn't have the opportunity to pilot. We didn't have the opportunity to prototype. It was literally, we wrote it, we talked it through, we practiced what we needed to practice, and then it was live. So it really was, some of it was a bit seat to the pants, which is, you know, the next one, producing the sessions. So I think more than anything we've ever done, producing these sessions, and I'd say particularly the virtual ones, it was almost like producing and writing live TV. So as Laura mentioned, we were all present at every session alongside Graham, the facilitator, absolutely an integral part of the program. He's coming back next year, so we're really pleased for that. But it gave us the opportunity to really react on the fly. So become part of the cohort and really have that connection with them, and kind of you know, build that relationship. But we could even react on the fly if we needed to. So as people were in breakouts or as people were having breaks, you know, we could discuss between the three of us, what do we need to emphasize something? I noticed people were asking this question about this particular thing. Shall I change the slide that's kind of 3 slides on, so that we're addressing that? So it was almost like we were changing things live during the adverts. So, you know, we were able to pivot accordingly, even in those sessions themselves, which again was something that we don't normally get the opportunity to do. So it was really interesting and different. So let's finish with some final thoughts. So I guess my first one would be to embrace blue sky thinking.
Mhm.
Don't think we can't do that. Think, how can we do that? So, and that goes to kind of budget as well. So I think someone in the chat said, the client clearly had deep pockets. And yeah, we were lucky that they really valued kind of the investment they were putting into this. But I think at the same time, we still had to think about how could we do things within that budget. And I think sometimes it almost causes you to be even more creative when you have those boundaries. So yeah, think about what's possible. How can we do that rather than we can't do that? And I think that for me, that really made the difference when we were putting this program together. Laura, what about you?
Plan everything. Nothing at all can be left to chance. We had it with the launch event on Coombe Abbey. We need to think about who needs to be where, what will they be doing, what's the contingency, and it always takes longer than what you think. And also, the key thing for me is always have the learner at the heart of everything that you do. All that creativity and planning will be for nothing at all if you don't get the intended result, be that skills development or change in behavior, whatever it is. So we certainly do, as we architect things, and considering the delivery is keeping them at forefront of your mind.
Thanks, Laura. So I hope that was useful for everyone. I hope you got some insight into kind of what we're talking about here. And it was good for you to hear our story. So thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions? Take some
Oh,
questions.
Laura, Craig, great session. We have a
Thank you.
couple questions that come in for the last couple minutes of that we have here. I did see that there's one in the chat. If you would be able to define white glove service versus regular service.
So I think I know what you mean here. So what I would say is that what we talked about today, so the future leaders journey was definitely white glove. So everything was specific for that cohort. But equally, you can do something similar to kind of wider audiences. So I'll give you an example. More or less at the same time as this was happening, so kind of the second half of 2022, we actually did something similar. So we went with the same approach of kind of that event-based, experience-based, in-person learning for one of our global financial clients. And that was actually being rolled out to 400 of their frontline leaders across the UK. So that was a much more kind of regulated service. So what we did was we really workshopped those with the client. We got our facilitators on early, our master facilitator on early, and we created that experience. So I think it was a 2-day workshop, a half-day workshop, and a 1-day workshop. So 3 separate interventions that all of the 400 people were going through. And through that process of workshopping, designing, we piloted the session. So we were really hands-on with the pilot, involved with our master facilitators, and then it got deployed out to the 400 people. And Laura and I, we did go on site a few times. So whenever we went to their conferencing facility in Birmingham, we always kind of put our head around the doors and saw who was kind of delivering from the faculty team. So we were able to kind of keep a high level eye on it. But really, we relied on our faculty, our facilitators, to deploy that to those 400 people. Similarly, as you're dealing with global audiences, we've done similar things for kind of 20,000 people plus around the globe. And again, it's really relying on that global faculty, but also using that global faculty to kind of bring it to life for those people in the different areas of the world. So, culturally, what we design in the UK is going to be different to what learners will respond to in Hong Kong and China, for example. But we have those faculty there who can really bring it to life and kind of do that localization. So whilst we've done the design and we've designed the experience, it's that faculty, those facilitators that bring it to life and bring that local flavor to it as they kind of do that global deployment. Anything you want to add to that, Laura?
No, I just think, again, that is the considerations that we do is when we're looking at global programs for clients, is who do we need to work with to ensure that that experience is going to add impact and it's going to be one that is brilliant experience for the learner. So we often work with our global teams, from faculty to account managers, to understand that throughout and what's right.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question that came in, and it says, if you have no real face-to-face activities like the kickoff, for example, would you still be able to call it event-based learning, or just to clarify the terminology is what they're asking?
Yes and no. So I think we approached each session, whether it was in person or whether it was virtual, we approached it as an event. And I'll go back to using that. It was like a television production. So it was like producing live TV. So I would use that event metaphor in a virtual sense, from the perspective of producing those live sessions that were delivered virtually. So in that sense, yes, I think you could call it event-based learning, because there was something happening in every single one of those virtual things that really brought it to life. Whether you could call the journey event-based without having that great kind of closing event at the end, I'm not sure. I don't know, Laura, what do you think? Because they did the year before, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think, so I would call it event-based, even if it were all as a virtual experience. Because I think if I think back to 2021, when the programme was fully virtual, I think those people went on that journey as an event, because we still looked at creating sessions that were impactful for each of those. Personally, I'm finding that a lot of clients are now really focusing on bringing people together for the moments that matter. And so we are seeing that they want that face-to-face interaction if it's right. And it's, we will work with clients to understand. For this particular client, they wanted the launch event as a virtual one. And we went back and said,
we pushed for
wrong, because we want to create the connections and the networking, and that is, let's do that from the off and have this as a face-to-face.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember to have that. Not everything needs to be face-to-face. So even as we kind of are now kind of more allowed to, as we're coming out of the pandemic, I think we still need to think about some elements will be impactful, and perhaps even more impactful in a virtual setting. And I think that's the important thing, that just because we can go back to face-to-face live learning, it shouldn't all be face-to-face live learning, because some things suit better to be virtual.
Okay. All right, I want to be mindful of time, but there is a question here, and actually this kind of goes with the virtual and live. They're asking about hybrid deliveries and how does that work in this space? And does it work in this space?
Ooh, it's interesting, hybrid delivery, because I think it's something quite new. I would say that most clients at the moment are not there yet in terms of the setup and the technology that's needed to deliver a successful hybrid event. Funnily enough, I was talking to a friend last week, and she works for a company that she was telling me they've got a university in Madrid who have the most amazing setup for hybrid that's really successful. So I need to get out and see that, because it's very few and far between clients that are kind of there yet. But it's exciting, right? Because it's something brand new. So watch this space, I would say. I think we're going to start seeing more. It's a new consideration that we'll have to bear in mind. But yeah, I think it could potentially, a little bit reserved right now because it's so new, but I think potentially it could be really a great opportunity for it as well to include everybody. But it's about creating as well, and bearing in mind when we look at that and we're looking at those considerations, how do you create the same experience for the person virtual as you do as the person in a face-to-face environment? So technology and design and there'll be lots of different considerations when we start doing that a little bit more.
And it's really difficult. So having been part of a few kind of hybrid workshops, if you're the person, if again, and this is if you don't have the technology, people are dialing in via Zoom, you've maybe got an owl camera in the middle of the desk or something like that. If you're the person who's kind of dialing in virtually, you often lose connection because the people in the room naturally kind of gravitate towards each other and the conversation. So it's a really special consideration and talent for that facilitator as well, to really put aside their proximity bias and focus as much on the people on the screen as the people in the room. Because we're human beings, it's not easy for us to do that. So like Laura says, it's not just the technology, but the technology plays a massive part. It's that kind of human element of it as well.
Yeah.
Great. And I just want to be conscious of time as well. We are pretty much at the end of today's session. I want to thank Laura and Craig for your presentation. It was a great discussion, I think, as well. And I want to thank everyone who is joining us for your time and attention. And we hope you'll join us again for another of our upcoming webinars. Visit GP Strategy's website to view future sessions. And I wish everyone on the call today a wonderful and productive rest of your day. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you again, Laura, Craig.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.